What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of OneMindSyndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40k. In this one, we'll be going over the Thousand Suns novel, where we have two Primarchs going toe-to-toe, Magnus the Red and Leman Russ. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and begin this epic battle. Purple lightning splits the sky, and the heavens darkened with the sudden fall of night. A deluge of black rain falls, soaking everything in an instant and saturating the air with the bitter taste of sodden ashes. Ahriman looks up in shock to see a flaming giant descending from the highest reaches of the pyramid of Photep. The crux Ansata rippled with pellucid green fire, and the kaleidoscopic bolts of lightning slamming into the ground. Magnus the Red was a glorious sight, his golden armor and wild red hair ablaze with etheric energy. His bladed staff threw off blinding arcs of lightning that destroyed armored vehicles and thunderous explosions. Magnus swept his eye across the horrified space wolves, and all who met his gaze died in an instant as they were driven to madness by the Stygian depths of infinite chaos that they saw. No sane man could witness such vileness without recoiling, and the invading army paused in its slaughter, shocked by the sight of such dreadful things glaring hungrily at the world below. Even the wolfen cowered before the sight of these abominable creatures, suddenly feeling the overwhelming insignificance of their existence. Only Leman Russ and his wolf companion stood unfazed by this vision of Magnus, and Ahriman saw a gleam of anticipation in the Wolf King's eyes, as though he relished the idea of the coming conflict. The Primarch of the Thousand Suns was a divine, rapturous figure of light amid the darkness around him. The gold of his armor had never been brighter, the red of his vast mane never more vivid. His flesh burned with a touch of immense power, greater than anything it had ever contained before. Ahriman looked over his shoulder as two gods of war clashed with the sounds of worlds colliding. Blazing light filled the pyramid, and the howl of Leman Russ vied with the thunderous lightning of Magnus. Leman Russ rained blow after blow on Magnus the Red, shattering the horned breastplate, and in return Magnus struck his brother with a searing blast of cold fire that crackled his armor and set light to his braided hair. It seemed as though the combatants had swollen to enormous proportions, like the giants they were in myth and legend. The Wolf King's frostblade struck at Magnus, but his golden axe turned the blow aside, as they spun and twisted in an epic battle beneath the madness of a blazing storm and a sheet of lightning and pounding thunder. This was a battle fought on every level, physical, mental, and spiritual, with each Primarch bending every ounce of their almost limitless power to the other's destruction. The waters around the pyramid broke upon the shores, black as oil, and churning as though an unseen tempest boiled beneath its surface. Space wolves and custodes plowed through the water, wading through the crashing spray to reach the pyramid in lieu of aiding Leman Russ in this battle. Magnus swept his hands to the side, and the warriors on the water cried out in agony as it transformed into corrosive acid, burning through ceramite plates and rendering flesh and bone to mere jelly. Thick rain fell, fit to drown the world, and the ground underfoot transformed into a stinking quagmire from which writhing shapes like grasping hands emerged. Wounded warriors were dragged down into the mud, struggling against their unseen attackers, but unable to resist being pulled under to their doom. Prospero was breaking apart, the veil between worlds cracking, and the maddening gibbers and screams of the great ocean's Desidens drove men to their knees in terror. The assault on their senses was total, and Ahriman could barely keep his feet as hurricane-force winds battered the pyramid, tearing glass panes from its structure and breaking the silver and gold towers from their corners. The epicenter of this destruction was Magnus and Russ. Such a contest of arms was the most desperate thing Ahriman had ever seen. He wanted to rush forward, to remind them of their former kinship, but to intervene in such a planet-shaking conflict would be suicide. Ahriman had cautioned his warriors not to wield their powers for fear of the flesh change, but Magnus showed no such restraint and battered Leman Russ with fists wreathed in fire and lightning. Russ was a Primarch, and such powers could shatter armies had little effect on him, save to drive him to higher fits of rage. Magnus drove his fist into Russ's chest, the icy breastplate cracking open with a sound like planets colliding. Shards of ceramite stabbed into the Wolf King's heart. And in return, Russ snapped Magnus's arm back, and Ahriman heard it shatter into 1,000 pieces. A blade of pure thought unsheathed from Magnus's other arm, and he drove it deep into Russ's chest through his shattered armor. The blade burst from Russ's back, and the Wolf King loosened a deafening bellow of pain. A chorus of the wolves that were not wolves added their howls to that of their master. The two enormous lupine monsters that accompanied Russ leapt upon Magnus, fastening their jaws upon his legs. Magnus slammed his fist into the black wolf's head, driving it to the ground with a strangled yelp, its skull surely shattered. With a bellow of anger, Magnus tore the white wolf from his leg with a thought, and he hurled it away over the heads of the milling army at Russ's back. A flare of black light erupted, and Leman Russ cried out in agony. His blade lashed out blindly, and it struck a fatal blow against the foe's most dreaded weapon, his eye. In an instant, the pyrotechnic cascade of light and fire was extinguished, and a stunning silence swept outward. All motion ceased, and the titans battling on the causeway were no more. Each Primarch now resorted to customary stature. Ahriman cried out as he saw Magnus reel back from the Wolf King, one hand clutched to his eye as his shattered arm crackled with regenerative energies. As broken and bloodied as Leman Russ was, he was a brawler enough to seize his opportunity. He barreled into Magnus and gripped him around the waist like a wrestler, roaring as he lifted his brother's body high above his head. All eyes turned to Russ as he brought Magnus down across his knee, and the sound of the Crimson King's back breaking tore through every warrior of the Thousand Sons' heart. Ahriman fell to his knees, dropping the book of Magnus as sympathetic pain like a white-hot spear stabbed through him. No pain in the world was worse, for this blow could unmake a Primarch, and such wounds were a death strike 100 times over to any mortal warrior. The Wolf King howled his triumph to the blackened heavens, and a rain of blood replaced the oil-black downpour as Prospero wept for her fallen son. Ahriman's tears were bloody as Leman Russ dropped Magnus to the mud and brought the Frostblade Mjolnir around to take the head of his defeated foe. With the last of his strength, Magnus turned his head, and his ravaged eye found Ahriman. "This is my last gift to you." Leman Russ's blade swept down, but before its lethal edge struck, Magnus whispered unnatural syllables unknown to man since he had first raised his guttural chants to the nameless gods of the sky. Magnus's body underwent an instantaneous dissolution, its entire structure unmade with a single word, and Ahriman gasped as vast and depthless power surged into his body. It was too much for any mortal man to contain, but as it swept through him, he knew what he had to do. Magnus had indeed given his last strength to save his sons, and a terrific groaning shattered the stillness, like the spine of the world shearing out of true. The sound of madness tore through the mundane substance of reality as the dying breath of a god unleashed power of impossible magnitude. The surface of Prospero twisted, and Ahriman felt a dreadful lurch of sickening vertigo. It felt like the bottom was fading out of the world, or like he was plunging down an endless shaft. The world vanished, replaced with the utter blackness at the end of the universe, when all living things have been dust for billions. And there you have it, guys. This was the epic battle between Leman Russ and Magnus the Red, and it was pretty crazy. Like, this guy is fighting against the probably second strongest psyker in all of the galaxy, and he holds his own. Now, let's not forget that Magnus was basically fighting an entire world. He was basically causing earthquakes and lightning strikes against the Custodes, the Sisters of Silence, and the Wolves here, and he did a lot. Like, he was fighting fronts all over the place. He was also trying to save his own men. He killed Leman Russ's wolves, and at the same time, he managed to stab clean through Leman Russ, and he almost had him beat. But at the end of the day, Magnus was just fighting on too many fronts, and Leman Russ just knew when and how to strike, and because of that, he managed to break the back of Magnus, which ultimately was what forced Magnus to call upon the Chaos Gods and become a worshipper of Tzeentch. So let me know your thoughts on this fight. This is a very interesting fight, and there's very cool things going on in this book, so I greatly recommend you guys read 1,000 Suns. And man, I am just excited. Whenever I see Primarchs go toe-to-toe, it's always interesting to kind of imagine this fight in your head, and you just have a very thematic battle. It's basically raining oil. It's black rain. You've got lightning strikes, fires, earthquakes, mudslides. It is really cool to just visualize in your head, and I can't wait when this gets animated, be it in some type of Warhammer Plus show, or if any talented YouTuber does it, I would be the first in line to watch this. But that's all I got for today, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. As always, thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. This has been the Sound Alchemist, part of OneMindSyndicate. Peace.